What do you think this means for Canada's relationship with China? Because, as you know, public opinion in our country has soured dramatically when it comes to China in recent years.
Well, I think there's a lot of implications that we need to suss out. I mean, first of all, let me say that I'm delighted to have both of the Michaels home where they belong with their families. I think that's a great story. But I think this is only one part of the puzzle. There are a lot of structural challenges in our relationship with China. And I think the important point is that these are not faced by Canada alone. Many of our partners, Australia, for example, has citizens still detained in China. Japan, which is another partner of us, has almost a dozen citizens detained in China as well. So as a country that led the charge to have this arbitrary detention declaration agreed to by several states around the world, and also has been fighting for 3 years for our citizens, we need to continue to keep the pressure on.
And what does that mean in terms of keeping the pressure on? What do you think realistically we can do, Jonathan? Because there's always this conversation about how, Canada is not the United States. We only have so much power and influence, especially when it comes to dealing with a country like China.
Well, indeed, we may not be the United States, but there's many different ways that we can put the pressure on. So the first thing is that we need to develop a strategic framework to do this. So part of this will be a strategy to deal with China and some of the challenges. And of course, there's opportunities that we have to seize, but we need to realize this in a very realistic, wide open lens. And the second thing will be work with our partners. So we don't have a strategy for the broader region, the Indo-Pacific or the Asia-Pacific, either. So we need to look at how we work with the Japans of the world, South Korea, Taiwan even, and countries in Southeast Asia who are facing similar challenges with the rise of China.
Yeah, tell me about that. The idea that, there are different new alliances coming into play now. We have, this recent news that the Americans will be supplying the Australians with nuclear sub-technology, the British part of that deal. You've also got the Quad, different countries in that region, India, Australia, Japan, the United States. Canada, large, of course, presence in the Pacific as well, given our coastline. Is it time for us to start to make some hard choices about the containment policy of China?
I think we do. And the reality is that the Indo-Pacific is not like the transatlantic network where we have NATO. Even though NATO has kind of sort of gone through an evolution, for a large part of its existence, it's had a strategic purpose and a very clear strategic purpose, first on the Soviet Union and now largely on Russia. But in the Indo-Pacific, there is no such large-scale multilateral alliance. So that leads to a lot of these sort of ad hoc systems, whether you have the Quad, now AUKUS as well. And I think for Canada, as a G7 country, not to even have a strategy on how to deal with this region is really concerning. Frankly, outside of just the Americans and the Japanese, the Indians and Australians, many of our European friends now have Indo-Pacific strategies. The Dutch, the Germans, the French, and yet Canada still doesn't have one. So we're really behind the 8 ball on this.
It's become quite clear from what happened to Michael Kovrig and Spavor that China does retaliate and China does bully and does throw its weight around. And I'm curious, how you go about threading that needle, because we are, of course, a big economic trading partner with China. The Canadian economy does depend to a certain extent on trade with China. And so how do you have both? How can you push back, try to contain China, at the same time try to avoid retaliation, which they've already done to Canada, they've done to Australia. They certainly don't have any problem doing that to countries they think they can get away with doing it to.
Well, I think there's going to be tough questions that we're going to have to ask ourselves. And some of these are going to be in government, but also the private sector is going to have to ask these similar questions. Because absolutely there are opportunities, economic opportunities, trade opportunities in China. And there will be times where we should seize those opportunities. But we have to see the bigger picture. If it's going to come at the cost of our interests and our values, and I think a lot of other states that are friends of Canada are realizing this too, whether it's their vulnerable supply chains in China, that we're going to have to start diversifying. And I think that precisely goes to the point of the broader Indo-Pacific. There are other partnerships, whether they're in Southeast Asia, in India, and elsewhere, that we can find different markets as well to sort of take away from the focus on China.
Jonathan, thanks for taking some time today. I'd love to get you back on the program in the days ahead.